The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this morning's Toolbox Talk. My name is Sean Frey, and I will be the organizer for you this morning. Guys, just before I do give it over to Chris to continue with the Toolbox Talk, if you guys have any questions whatsoever, just go ahead and pop it in the questions tab. If it is a question on the service itself, I will go ahead and answer it. But if it is a question on the source material of the webinar, I will go ahead and leave it for Chris at the end of the session, so that those that do not have questions and need to go are then able to go then after that, or they can stay and listen to everybody else's questions, because you never know, it might just help you guys as well. So guys, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Chris. Enjoy the session. Chris, are you there?
Yes, thank you very much, Sean. And once again, a very big welcome to all of our attendees this morning. We really appreciate your attendance at these Toolbox Talks. And on behalf of IOPSA and FEM, these Toolbox are obviously brought to you by these guys. They are really doing some great work in the industry, always assisting us to bring health and safety to you. But at the same time, it is helping us to interact with each other. And I'd like to just say a very big thank you to all of you that have been in contact with me. I know sometimes I do get back to you a little bit late at some stages. Sometimes I'm a bit on the ball and I can get back to you on the same day. But I would like to say thank you very, very much for that interaction. We really do appreciate it. Some of the questions that have been coming through are touching base on SAOSH and how to get your one CPD point for these Toolbox Talks every Tuesday morning. Basically, what you do is just sign into your membership account in SAOSH. Make sure you go into the actual CPD point section. Just add the event. You can put it as FEM Toolbox Talk. Put the date. Make sure you've got the correct expiry date, which is normally 3 years from date of issue. So if you're looking at anything in 2018, your date of expiry will be 2021. And then it should be approved. We are getting 4 CPD points every single month. So if you are not a member of SAOSH, why not go ahead and check out their website and see what benefits you will be able to receive as a member. And then guys, as always, please continue having those questions coming through. You've got my email address. For those new who are joining, if you do not have it, Sean will go ahead and put it on the chat side. chris@ohss.co.za. Please feel free at any time to consult me, send me an email, questions, queries, suggestions, and even the criticism. I do appreciate it. I'm not perfect. I do make mistakes, and I appreciate it when you guys do send me some good suggestions. Thank you very much. So last week at the end of our Toolbox Talk, we had a bit of a vote to see who would like to hear ventilation and who would like to hear about radiation. And an overwhelming amount of you, I think it was 98%, opted for ventilation. So obviously this is very needed in the industry, and this is exactly what we want. We want to hear from you. What do you want to hear? We will do the research and as much as possible get the correct content for you, so that when we present these Toolbox Talks, it's really something that is of concern to you, something that affects you on a daily basis, and really something that can assist you in this behavioral change toward health and safety. And again, if there is anything personally you would like to hear, please drop us a mail. If we get enough of these in, hopefully we can make a Toolbox Talk just for you on these specific subjects. So this morning's Toolbox Talk on ventilation, we are going to look at the workplace environment. And this could be in offices, it could be in factories, even out in the open. Obviously, there's a lot higher ventilation out in the open through natural means. Yet ventilation will affect each one of us at any given time during our working situations. And the environment that we are working in really could pose a very big threat to us, especially if we are stuck in an office very often, perhaps working indoors throughout the entire day. And for many of us, we always say it's good to have this fresh air, but even outside, the dangers are still there. So let us take a look at ventilation, how we are affected by ventilation, what are the regulations regarding ventilation, and then how can we play our part in preventing ventilation hazards from becoming a reality in our workplace. So for those of you who are working in offices, I'm sure this is going to be a great one for you. For those of you out in the open, stay tuned to see exactly what is affecting you, because a lot of us are getting sick. It's not just because of winter. It could be because of the poor air quality in our working environment. So to start off, the very first regulation that we want to look at is your environmental regulations. Since it's the workplace environment around us that causes this poor ventilation, there are some aspects of this regulation that we need to abide by, specifically being an employer. For one, you need to ensure that every workplace in your undertaking is ventilated by either natural or mechanical means, so that the air breathed by employees rather does not endanger their safety. As well as this ventilation by natural or mechanical means must ensure that the carbon dioxide content does not exceed 3% the volume of the air in that working environment. Now you might sit back and say, well, how do we prove this? How do we as employers or even employees who are entrusted with this source of information prove that the air around us does not endanger the safety of employees or does not exceed 3% of the volume of air? Well, it's very simple. An air survey, a ventilation survey, or air monitoring can be done at your workplace. There are many companies out there providing this source of information for you. It can be done once or twice throughout the year just to ensure that your workplace does not exceed the limits as outlined. And remember, we cannot stand in a working environment and say, well, I can't see carbon dioxide, I can't smell it, and I certainly cannot hear it. Well, that is because it cannot be seen. You cannot smell carbon dioxide and you cannot hear it either. But it can be stopped. It can be prevented from causing illnesses and potential suffocation within our workplace environment. So the regulations are very important for us to follow. The adherence of these regulations assists us in ensuring that the air in our workplace is not endangering the safety of our employees. The prescribed exposure limits to these airborne substances also must not be exceeded. Once again, this can only be achieved by ensuring you have the correct monitoring tools or a company coming in to do this ventilation survey. Most companies are under obligation to do these surveys, specifically in the types of industries that they are working in. Many would fall under things like workshops, where you are using a lot of chemical substances. Others could be electro plants, dust plants, chemical plants, cement plants. All of these areas in which the air is being polluted by the work that we are performing. Then the law requires you to have air and ventilation monitoring. But what about for each one of you that are not falling in one of these categories? Well, potentially you are still affected by this, and your work processes may accumulate in providing a poor environment or a poor working condition in terms of ventilation for your employees. Thus, this law will then apply to you, ensuring that the exposure limits and even lastly the concentration of any explosive or flammable gases or vapors does not exceed the low explosive limits of that gas, vapor, or dust. Again, having a very good monitoring program from medical, ventilation, lighting, and across the board to ensure that our workplace is not causing the hazard of affecting our employees adversely. So perhaps this is the first time you are hearing about this type of survey or this type of monitoring program. Well, please do not fret. What we are encouraging you to do is do a little bit more research. Drop me an email and I can send you a few of the regulations as well as this environmental regulations on what you as an employer or the responsible employee are supposed to do. and perhaps some contact details of the relevant people to contact to ensure that you are abiding by these types of regulations. Do your own research. There is a lot of information out there. Read through the environmental regulations as well as an important tool of your risk management program in a company. Remember, poor air quality is a risk. It is a hazard to the employees working in that environment. And thus, Section 8 of the Occupational Health and Safety Act states that the working environment must be free of this risk. And to achieve this, there are certain fundamentals that we must put in place as a company or an organization. If you are a rather small company, does that mean you're exempt? Well, not at all. There are still things that you can do. They do not have to be expensive. It really just works in conjunction with ensuring a very good health and safety program for your company. Now, where the measures prescribed in this regulation are not practical. So oftentimes we are working in a working environment where there are exposure limits. They are being exceeded. The amount of oxygen is dropping to a low of 19%, now becoming an oxygen deficiency environment. Certain things that we cannot control. In this situation, an employer shall provide every employee and make sure that that employee uses it correctly, a respiratory protective equipment. Please remember that you do need to take a look at the type of respiratory protection. We cannot just use a dust mask. Many times we have to use a type that reduces the exposure of that dangerous environment. Now, I'm not saying, as the picture that you see there below, saying that we're going to have to wear these gas masks while we are working in an office environment. Certainly not. Our office environment should never exceed these types of exposure limits. But we can really see the effect that this type of legislation or regulations have on us as employers. And as those responsible employees, what are you doing to ensure that the environment around you is kept in a ventilated or a safe and healthy environment for all employees around you? So remember, we want to reduce the exposure of poor ventilation, of hazardous chemicals in the environment, or even the exposure limits to this dangerous toxic substances that accumulate in our environment on a daily basis. As a last note on these regulations from the environmental side, the very last point of this subsection is to inform every single employee on the dangers as well as the precautionary measures against excessive exposure. Now, for those of you listening in from the health and safety side, you will realize that this forms the basis of a risk assessment. So for those of you out there who are not actually performing the tasks of risk assessments, perhaps speak to the person who is doing your risk assessment. Remember, to ensure that we understand the dangers, we need to identify the hazard. We then do an analysis or an assessment of the risk that is attached to that hazard. So if the hazard is a dangerous working environment, well, the risks could be exposure to that, suffocation, and all forms of medical problems. Again, we then want to focus on the precautionary measures, those control points. And these controls that are put in place, whether administrative controls or engineering controls, must be made aware to every single employee who will be affected by that environment. So speak to the person who is performing a risk assessment, make sure that they are taking this type of hazard into consideration and ensuring that every employee is made aware of the hazards that are affecting them. So all of us, whether an employer, an employee, whether currently working in a dangerous environment or not, at one point or another, you may be affected by this very thing. Look out for sluggish work performance, workers calling in sick very often, coughing, sneezing, having trouble breathing. Now, all of these types of pre-existing medical conditions often occur because of poor ventilation or because of the bad condition of the air around us, the poor air quality. Now, we're not saying that each one of these is because of poor air quality. Sometimes we are just fatigued. Sometimes we have the flu because of it being winter. But many times we pre-diagnose a condition as flu or as laziness just because we do not want to face the fact that there could be a deeper root cause to the problem. So when we're taking a look at our working environment, do not work it off immediately just as some sort of illness. It could be because of the poor air quality in our environment. But there are things that you can do. There are prevention methods. And as we are always saying in these toolbox talks, prevention is better than cure. So instead of going and costing yourself high medical expenses, rather prevent this from becoming a situation where we have to go in for medical surveillance. Rather, take a look at each one of these symptoms, understand the underlying cause, and then have a proper monitoring program in our company to ensure that the environment is actually not causing the danger to us. Now, in America, and this is taken from America, so I do apologize that we do not have any for South Africa, but in America, this is called sick building syndrome. In other words, the actual place of employment where people are going to earn a salary or an income is the very place that is killing them. It is a building in which the environment puts the occupants at risks for upper respiratory infections. And in the US alone, 1 out of 4 buildings, that is 25% of all the buildings, are actually classified as sick buildings. This means that 64 million workers frequently experience 2 or more symptoms associated with the sick building syndrome, such as nose irritation, eye irritation, or headaches, often just immediately excused as some type of symptom of flu, or perhaps overwork or stress. Many times, actually 25% of the time, it is because of this type of bad working environment or the air around us. 20% of all these illnesses are either caused or aggravated because of polluted indoor air. So those working in offices, is your air quality clean? Indoor pollution ranks one of the top 5 environmental risks to public health since the 1990s, and it is only increasing. With a higher rate of ozone-friendly products coming out, there are umpteen amounts of non-friendly biological agents and chemical agents that are being thrown into our atmosphere. So indoor air quality, this is the temperature, humidity, ventilation, chemical or biological contaminants of the air inside a building. And around the world, every 20 seconds, a person dies due to poor indoor air quality. These are staggering amounts. 2 out of 3 indoor air quality problems involve, first of all, insufficient HVAC or air duct systems. And this is due to us not having either regular maintenance or the correct type of air ducting systems. A buildup of just 0.042 inches of dirt on a heating or cooling coil can result in decrease in efficiency of 21%. Now, you might think, well, how is this possible? Well, statistics have been proven to show that in these environments, when our air monitoring systems, our HVAC, our air duct systems are not cleaned on a regular basis, people at work are getting ill. They are taking off from work. This is costing the company an overall amount of millions throughout the year. 1 out of 6 people suffer from allergies, and they do so because of the direct relationship to fungi and bacteria in air duct systems. It is such an important part of our housekeeping, of our risk management, the actual core to our business in health and safety, to ensure cleanliness of our occupational health and safety systems, those things that are in place to ensure the environment is safe for everyone. And this would include the HVAC or air ducting systems that we have in our environment. It could be something as simple as a table fan. Now, many of you have this at home or perhaps at work. On those hot days, you have a fan. This is to cool you down. But at the same time, we have this for good ventilation in the office. And we have fans blowing in and out. Have you ever looked at the grid of a fan after just 1 week of use? Have you noticed the amount of dust, dirt, or debris that has accumulated on that? Well, remember, this very small spores of fungi that are connected to that you might not see, are being blown in and around the environment all the time. This is what is causing many illnesses, sicknesses, and days of leave due to respiratory problems in the environment. So again, is there something you can do? Well, definitely, each one of us are at risk. Poor air quality is a top 5 cause of absenteeism in the workplace. If you don't want to be absent due to illness and sickness, well, keep the area clean. This poor air quality also contributes to reduced work production. It makes us fatigued. And when somebody is not feeling well, and I'm sure you will agree, if you don't feel well, how productive are you? So again, is there something that you can be doing to prevent the silent killer from entering your workplace, your office, perhaps even your home? Well, look at the symptoms and do not write it off too quickly. Make sure our monitoring plan effectively identifies what the root cause of these symptoms are. Ensure your workplace is ventilated in accordance with environmental regulations by natural or mechanical means. Do not close yourself in just because it is cold outside. Ensure you have natural ventilation. In some instances, air monitoring and surveys are mandatory requirements. Take a look at is your workplace a mandatory requirement or workplace for air monitoring? Check the contents of air fresheners. Are they harming our environment? Are they causing our environment to have unnatural substances that could be affecting us on a health basis? Recycle and reuse, reduce. As we always say in South Africa, we want to ensure a greener environment for everyone. And then again, do not allow waste to accumulate. So very good housekeeping is a very important part, and it goes a long way in ensuring that the quality of air, the quality of the working environment that we are working in is always at a high standard. And all of us, again, can do our part by obeying the non-smoking area. If you are ill, consult the doctor and do not return to work if you have been booked off. You are just adding to the poor quality of air when coughing and splattering or promoting an environment where illness is allowed. Wash your hands after using the toilet. Keep your body clean. These are all small things that we can do on a day-to-day basis to ensure that our bodies, the environment, and the air around us is not affected by any of these pollutants. So when we look in an office environment, there are so many areas or points of exposure that many of us can be affected by, such as particles from photocopiers, fax machines, printers, the transmission of bacteria from our hands. Remember again, wash your hands after any dirty activity. Volatile compounds from monitors or technology, dust mites from chairs, carpets. And then a poor air quality is one of the highest results because of human density. When there are more people in the same environment, the air quality always drops. Should this be the case in your environment? Well, again, is there something you are doing to prevent this from actually occurring? We mentioned earlier that the Occupational Health and Safety Act Section 8 states that every employer shall provide and maintain, as far as reasonably practicable, a working environment that is safe and without risk to the, first of all, health, and then safety of his employees. Many of us are focusing so much on the safety of our employees that we are neglecting the health and the adverse effects to the health of our employees. Remember, a healthy employee is a more productive employee. A healthy environment lends to a healthy employee. So take this responsibility seriously. Ensure that as far as possible, as far as reasonably practical, our working environment is without the risk to the health of our employees because of poor air in our working place. So maybe you can stop and think for a few minutes. Your current environment, your current workplace, all the current tasks or processes that you are doing, are they increasing the exposure to workplace poor ventilation or poor air environments? Or are they reducing these effects? Well, this is up to you. But each one of us can do our part. All we need to do is think safely. By changing our perception toward health and safety, letting it become a behavioral-based program, we will then continue to work safe. And if you combine these two, we will achieve that being safe in our working environment, whether it be from a health aspect, on ventilation like we spoke about today, or even on the safety aspect of actually working in conjunction with our risk management program in our company, or in conjunction with the method statements, safe working or safe operating procedures, as well as the risk assessment that is outlined for our specific tasks. Well, as usual, we have a know-how section or a did you know section for health and safety. And this one that I decided to use today is in connection with the consumption of alcohol in South Africa. It is a staggering amount. Out of 100% of the people who die because of alcohol-related deaths, 20% are female and 80% are male youth in South Africa. In schools, 50% of learners have admitted to engaging in underage drinking. This has promoted a 60% of South African crimes are directly related to substance abuse, whether it be alcohol, dagga, cocaine, tik, or heroin. In some way, these are affecting us as South Africans on a day-to-day basis. Every single year, 7,000 people die because of driving under the influence of alcohol or any other type of drug. So many of us do not understand the hazards. Many out there are not realizing the danger of the effects of substance abuse in our environment. Is there something you can do as an organization, either with your employees or with someone you know, or with an organization that is fighting this, to be able to do your part in preventing the high rate of alcohol syndrome in South Africa, which is 5 times higher than the first world country, United States? So really, do your part not only in our working environment, but let us make concern for each other, concern for our environment, concern for our entire country, a part of our day-to-day lives, not only between 9 and 5 when we are at work. We'd like to say thank you very much once again from those who brought us these Toolbox Talks, FEM and IOPSA. We really, really appreciate the efforts that you are putting in. If any of you are logging in to listen to this, we really appreciate you, as well as Sayosh for accrediting this with 1 CPD point, but especially to all of you attendees, every single one of you who are playing a part in ensuring a safe environment, or perhaps just listening in to try to do something. Your efforts are really appreciated. And oftentimes, if we do not succeed, do not stop starting. I heard this expression the other day: if you fail, just start again. In other words, you never stop starting. You never stop trying to be safe. And On that note, log in next week where we look at the next topic that affects each and every one of us as employees, the duties as outlined by legislation on what we as employees are responsible for. So that's all from me this morning. It's Chris from OHSS Consulting. I'm going to hand it over back to Sean for any questions. But please, you've got my email address. Keep in touch. I really appreciate the interaction. Thank you, Sean.
Perfect, Chris. We do have quite a few questions this morning, and I think we need to get into it as soon as we can because there are quite a few. Right, the first question reads, what about air conditions in vehicles? They might cause dirt buildup or not?
So most certainly, you will often see that when you are doing a service on your vehicle, depending on the amount of kilometers or which car you have, they are always going to change the filter for your aircon. Please make sure that this is done on a regular basis. Speak to the manufacturer to see how often this needs to be changed. But generally it is at intervals of services as required by that manufacturer. If you're not taking your car in for a service at manufacturers, or perhaps it's an older vehicle, just go ahead and speak to someone at that dealership. Ask them when is the best time to replace it, and you will be able to find a YouTube video on how to perhaps even perform that yourself. But definitely it is a concern for us vehicle owners that the air quality inside the vehicle is always polluted.
Perfect. The next question reads, hi. I do apologize. The next question reads, hi Chris, is in an office where approximately 20 people work, how often do you need to clean the aircon filtration system on average?
Well, look, again, and thank you very much for these questions that are coming through, guys. We really appreciate them. I'm not going to be able to give you an exact date and say that it's every 24 hours or every week. Really, it depends on the company. The manufacturer will, again, also give you some very good guidelines. My suggestion would be to have a regular monitoring program where on a day-to-day, on a weekly basis, these things are being checked, not necessarily cleaned, but just inspected to ensure that they are still clean. And when they are found to be deficient or when they are found to not be clean, these things can then go ahead and be cleaned. The filters, though, that is something you will have to speak to the different manufacturers of these aircons. But really, the more you clean it, obviously, the better. We just want to ensure that that air quality is always remaining pure and well ventilated for the employees. So perhaps have a little checklist that on a day-to-day basis, somebody goes around just to check that they are still clean, and then perhaps you can have a weekly to a monthly cleaning schedule.
All right, and then just a follow-up on that question, would whatever the interval be vary between winter and summer?
Most definitely it will, and that is because many employees start closing windows during winter, thus concentrating the effects of poor ventilation in on that environment. And then obviously we are breathing in pure air and then breathing out your carbon dioxide. So this is also affecting that. So really, during winter times, the intervals will be a lot shorter.
All right. The next question reads, is there legislation in South Africa that prohibits painting in offices during working hours, or is it just best practice?
Well, definitely there is legislation, and that falls under Section 8, as well as the section of 5 that we've just discussed with your ventilation on the environmental regulations. Remember, as an extension of ensuring the working environment is free of the hazard of contaminants in the working environment, it will then stretch to any chemical or biological agent. Thus, Section 8 of the OSHA can be used to show that painting in an office can be done when employees are not affected. And then remember, paint obviously needs a certain amount of time to dry and a certain amount of time for those chemicals to stop radiating off the wall. The manufacturer of that paint will give you the guidelines, the exposure limits, as well as the amount of time that you're allowed to be exposed to that. The employees of that office then again should not be exposed during those periods of time. So again, environmental regulations, Section 5, as well as the Occupational Health and Safety Act, Section 8, will be your legislation on that.
All right. The next question reads, when using a gas heater in an office environment, is it sufficient to just have a window slightly open?
Well, again, this is a very difficult question. There's no exact answer. We don't know what your air quality in that environment really is. Looking at the environmental regulations, we can either use natural means or your mechanical means of ventilation. As long as the carbon dioxide is not exceeding 3% of the air volume, then it should be sufficient. But it can only be achieved by understanding how much air or clean air is in that environment. And a survey will be able to do that for you. So we cannot say, yes, 100% one window will help, and we cannot tie ourselves down to that. All we can say is if you are using any means to keep warm in the office environment, as long as the carbon dioxide or that CO2 level does not reach higher than 3%, then you are still safe, no matter which means you are taking to achieve that.
All right, then we have just got something else from one of the attendees here. He says, desk fans I haven't cleaned since I bought 3 years ago. It is a great point. I'm also just wondering how contaminated is my wife's hairdryer. So I think that's just
That's a very
all
good
right.
question. Thank you very much. Obviously, heat will always increase the possibility of fungi and bacteria. So definitely, this does need to be cleaned. The manufacturer will, however, give you the cleaning agents as well as the tools to be able to clean such devices such as your hair dryers for your wife. But definitely the desk fans need to be cleaned on a daily basis, since these spores, bacteria and fungi build up over night, and the next day you will be affected by them. Thanks very much, Sean.
All right, and then just a comment from the audience here. Never use a hotel hairdryer, as it has been proven by studies that the cleaners do not clean it. Okay, guys, I am getting quite a few questions regarding the recording of these sessions and downloadable and such. Chris, as far as I remember, if they do contact you, you do see what you can do with regards to slides, correct?
That is correct, Sean. So I provide a slide PowerPoint presentation that does not have the voiceover, so you don't have to hear me going on and on, but the content certainly is up for everybody. It is free of charge. You can drop me an email. I'll send you this entire slide presentation. Again, it's not the recording, so it's not us speaking in the background. It's just the actual content in slideshow.
All right, guys. So unfortunately, okay, so I have sent Chris's email in the chat a couple of times throughout the webinar, and I've just sent it again. But unfortunately, the recordings themselves are the property of FEM and SEOSH. But as Chris said, if you just email him, he can sort out the slides for you. But as most of you are inquiring about the audio, unfortunately, we cannot release that. But Chris, that is the end to all of the comments that we do have here. Would you like to say something to end off?
Yeah, just a very big thank you to all those questions and everybody who stayed in attendance, who just wanted to hear or take a little bit of note of these questions. Please drop me an email at any time, and we really look forward to having you as a regular attendant on these Toolbox Talks. Thank you very much, and thank you to you, Sean, as well.
Perfect. Thanks so much, guys, for joining us this morning. Thanks, Chris, for taking the time to prepare this morning's and to present, as we do know that it does take quite a bit of time behind the scenes. But anyway, guys, I hope to see everyone again the same time next week. Enjoy the rest of your week. Bye-bye.